let me tell you about my company. And if you notice, this is set up like a pyramid. And within my company, I have people to handle pensions, investments. The financial planning and insurance planning is my area of expertise. Group insurance are some of the top people in the industry, and we have a way to reduce medical costs while matching benefits. Casualty insurance is just some people I know that if you have a son who had an accident, your rates went through the roof, or you have a couple of trucks in your company and the rates went up and you want a second opinion, I'll refer you to those people. But everything else I can help you with. Your stockbroker may be a pal who is a frat brother for you. So, you want to continue using them, that's fine. But I'll give you a second opinion. By doing this, what generally happens is I'm looking over the investments and I give it to my investment guy. I review the pension. If I spot anything, I give it to the pension guy, and I can come back with recommendations. But what I'm saying to the business owner is, you just have to call Allan Mendels with any of these questions, and I'll get you the answers within one day. Now, I'm going to throw out a lot of ideas that may not be exactly on topic, but there's so many things that run through my mind from MDRT meetings, from NAIFA meetings, from company meetings, and one of them is, what I say to business owners is, how often do you have a board of directors meeting? They'll say, board of directors meeting? I've never had one. I don't have a board of directors. I said, oh, well, I assume you have a couple of lawyers, one that drafts documents and one maybe who protects you if someone wants to sue you. You have an accountant. You may have one or several people you've bought life insurance from. You may have one or two people you've bought securities from. You have a casualty broker. Great socks, by the way. When have you ever gotten them all together? And the answer is never. I say it's going to be, you'd be amazed what happens if we do that. And then I will help the business owner talking about what are the things that keep him or her up at night, and arrange this meeting. And it gives me the opportunity to meet the accountant and the attorney and the other advisors. Obviously, I don't have the insurance advisor show up, but you probably figured that out already. So I've turned this chart into something that can create some additional benefits for myself. Now, there's a man by the name of Larry Wilson. We'll come back to that. I'd like to talk for a couple of minutes about the ways that I sell disability insurance, because I happen to think it's a much easier sale than life insurance. Most people who are in our business think that disability is more complicated, it's harder to sell, the underwriters are tougher, and all those things may be true, but when you're talking to an individual, they buy life insurance because they love someone. They buy disability insurance because they can see what's in it for themselves. Life insurance is, if I die, I have a good-looking husband, he'll find someone else right away. I have a good-looking wife, there are probably 10 guys who are going to want to marry her, I don't need that much life insurance. But if I'm disabled, I want to make sure that there's enough money coming in every day. So that's the first reason. The second reason is that there are fewer insurance companies that sell disability, so there's less competition that way. The third and best reason is there are fewer of you who are talking to your clients about disability, so that distinguishes me. So that's why I like talking about disability insurance. Whoops. There we go. Thank you. Have a little hardware problems, but I can fix it quickly. So I like this chart. By the way, you each should have gotten an email that included all of these slides. Each of you should have gotten an email that includes all these slides and some others. I like this one because it just throws the idea out. What have you insured? The golden eggs, your house, your car, your stuff? Or have you insured the goose? I like using a pad with clients. And what I usually have on the pad is a chart that looks like this that I've written out beforehand. And so car, what's the value of your car? So I might say, I have a really nice Acura, it's $35,000. You have it insured? Yes. What's the value of your home? It's $600,000. What do you have insured for? $600,000. Yes. Your stuff. If your house burns down, do you have insurance to cover all the stuff in the house? Yes. Do you have replacement value? Of course I have replacement value. I noticed your wife, if I've met him before, or do you have your wife's diamond ring insured? Or your diamond ring if I'm talking to a woman? Oh yeah, about how much is it worth? $20,000. So do you have that insured? Yes. How about your income? About how much do you make? Now, very often, they're okay about giving me this other information, but they sort of freeze up on that. If they say it's none of your business, or I don't know you well enough, or whatever, I say, okay, let's just assume, and I try to take a good guess based on the person's standard of living and trappings, et cetera. Let's say I'll say, well, let's just say you make $100,000 a year. If you became disabled, how much money would you receive? Well, I don't know. I know I get Social Security, and I understand that's pretty good. Oh, do you have anything else? I think my company has a plan that'll provide $3,000 a month. So let's just say you'd have about $3,000 a month. Isn't it interesting that you have your car insured for the full value, you have your house insured for the full value? I know around here you can get a pretty nice house for $400,000. Why not insure it for $400,000, save a lot of money, and if your house burns down, you just move to another house. Your wife's diamond is insured for $20,000. I was looking for an anniversary present for my wife, and I found that $10,000 buys a pretty nice diamond. Why do you have it insured for $20,000? Well, what you probably could guess, you're probably ahead of me, is that what I'm doing is I'm setting the stage not only for disability, but also a conversation about human life value. If you don't know about human life value, that's the formula that the courts use if someone dies, if they were killed, let's say, by a Coors beer truck. And the human life value is, if you're 40 or under, it's 20 times your earnings. 40 to 50, it's 15 times your current earnings. 50 to 60, it's 10 times. After 60, it's 1 times to 2 times your net worth. So I might ask them, based on that, how many times, by the way, this is much as I'm going to remove here in Las Vegas. And, you know, they say in New York. What? Oh, I'll put it back on. It's okay. You don't need to rewire it.
I can just attach it to your tie, but.
Thank you.
Yeah.
They say in New York, what happens in Las Vegas stays in Las Vegas. But what I hope, and you know, I was happy to see that this is being recorded, because I've tried to share the best things that I've learned from 39 MDRT meetings, is that you can happily share it. you can do your research and copy it, and you can pass it along if you find it's valuable. So human life value, then I say, you know, based on that, how many times your income are you currently insured for? Now, this is the first meeting, and what I've done is I found what kind of car he has, and you know, probably he's mentioned it's a new car and he has it on a lease, so he has to insure it for the full value. I found out what the value of his home is. I may have found out how much he's earning. I found out if he has adequate disability and adequate life insurance, and it's the first meeting. And I haven't asked him anything about buying. So let me now proceed with, so this is, you know, the charts. You can copy down what I had there. I just talked quickly. The reason we have disability insurance is that you have your earnings, you have your expenses of daily living, whatever's left over builds wealth to achieve your goals. By the way, if you want to succeed and have the ability to retire at 65, what you need to do, and this no one's talking about, is set aside roughly 20% of your net income. That sounds like an outrageous number to most people, but if they're not doing it, they're going to fail. So I just mentioned that quickly in passing. I'm putting more emphasis on it in our conversation, but that's what you should keep in the back of your mind, because that's what you need to help people do, and it gives you the opportunity to sell insurance products, investment products, to be referring them possibly to bankers, to lawyers, to accountants. That's really what we do, and it all comes out of this initial disability presentation. If you're unable to work, if you're disabled, your income stops, your expenses don't go down much. How much do you spend buying lunch and gas getting to work? That's the only things that change. So you have a deficit, you have to take money out of the bank and your other investments and say goodbye to your goals. This is really more for us, but I would adapt it for your clients too. If you're 40 years old and you're earning $100,000 a year and you only get 5%, 3% raises, you're going to earn over $3.5 million between now and retirement. How much of that are you going to keep? I've really set the stage for both disability, life, and investments by this conversation. If you're disabled, you either have to depend on the government, spending down your assets, or insurance. Social Security, you have this, I'm not going to spend time on it, will only pay you if you're totally disabled and not likely to return to work for a minimum of 12 months. Of all the people who apply for Social Security, and it hasn't changed since 2007, a third get it on the first shot. With a lawyer, less than half get Social Security benefits. And it comes to about $1,800 a month. The next page I gave you because it's a way to put individual insurance in perspective with long-term group disability. The criteria for disability policies, and if you don't understand it, get together with someone who understands disability insurance in Las Vegas and get to know it well and be able to present it to your clients. Residual, to me, is the most important part of all, because the statistics are that most people are disabled for a limited amount of time. And I'll explain what I mean by limited in a second. That if you're disabled for 3 months, you might have 12 or 24 months where you have a loss of income. And residual is the part of a policy that says if you go back to work and you have a loss of income, we'll continue to pay you on a percentage basis. If you're disabled for 2 years, which is a lot more than 3 months, you may have a residual problem that lasts 5 or 6 years. So the period of disability usually has a period of lost income that may be 3, 4, 5 times as long, and that's why residual is so important. You should learn these definitions also. When I'm meeting with someone and I'm using my yellow pad, I have these 4 words written out, and then I go, whoops, and then I describe it with the client. This is what most people want to know. How soon can I collect? How much can I collect? How long can I collect it? And then I explain a little bit about residual. So you bring this with you on a pad, and on disability, my goal is to close the sale in the first meeting, but rarely is it more than 2 meetings. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Whoops. So what I would like to talk about for the next couple, what I'd like to talk about for the next couple of minutes is some ideas. Oh, on disability, there's also 3 other policies besides conventional disability, and fewer people, at least in the New York area, maybe you're different here in Las Vegas, talk about any of this. Overhead expense, an accountant, attorney, a physician, a dentist, any professional has fixed overhead. You don't want her to have to pay for her rent and her other fixed expenses out of her disability policy. She can get an overhead policy that pays additional money during disability. Secondly, business reducing term, and lastly, buyout. Once again, if you're not aware of it, talk with someone who is a disability expert and learn it. I wanted to spend just a couple of minutes sharing the best ideas that I think I've picked up, the things that work that relate to appointment getting. The question I always start my meetings with, my first meeting, is after a little bit of small talk. I was thinking about our appointment, Mahesh, and I was wondering if I could ask you a couple of questions before we start. Nice transition from the small talk. I always get a yes. And then I say, and by the way, I learned this from a vice president of a very big advertising agency. What he said is, what is the reason, or why did you agree to get together with me today? You know, you're a busy guy. Why do you agree to take time out to meet with me? Now, the answer could be, well, Peter suggested, I see you. He said, you're a great guy. I'm no worse off than I was without asking the question. But what sometimes happens is they say, my next door neighbor was in a bad car accident. He skidded into a tree on a wet pavement. There's no one to sue, and he doesn't have enough money to live. Well, now I know disability is what he's concerned about. My cousin just dropped dead, and he was actually the husband of my cousin, and he didn't leave her enough money to live. So I realized I'm in the same place, and I want to take better care of my wife than he did for my cousin. Could be 100 things, but then you know exactly what your prospect's agenda is. So that's how I start. The second thing is, for every appointment, I try to have a goal, one goal. So if it's an opening appointment, almost always, it's how can I have a good meeting and get a second appointment. If that's happening, I make my second appointment at that meeting. I try to say, let's continue this conversation, how is, and by the way, I always use what's called the fatal alternative. How would it be next Wednesday afternoon, or would Thursday morning be better? I want them to think about which date, not if they want to say yes or no. The third thing, and these may not be in exact order, but I learned the sales track when I started. I knew nothing about selling. I was a biochem major, but I think that was one of the luckiest things that happened. And my manager expected me to learn it verbatim. He said, I'm going to give you a sentence, and you have to take off from that point. Well, what it allowed me to do is to really pay attention to body language and what was going on in the meeting. And if I got interrupted, and I can't tell you how often I've done joint cases with new agents to try to help them, and that's how they react. The client asks a question, and they react like they've been interrupted. Is that ridiculous? Anyway, so if the client asks a question, I know exactly where I was, and I get back on track because I don't want to leave anything out in that first meeting. And apropos that, the way I got started is, since I wasn't a salesman, I wasn't comfortable, I was getting bloody noses, what I did was I had this sales track that I learned. And I called up a lot of friends and relatives, and I said, you know, Sarah, I'd like to get together with you. As you know, I've gone into the insurance business, and I have a presentation I've learned. I'd like to practice it on you, because I know that you'll tell me if I'm doing it well, if I'm too fast, if it's understandable, blah, blah, blah. And everybody said, sure, I'll be glad to help you. And by the way, in hindsight, it was brilliant. But when I did it, I had no idea why it was so brilliant, because I had learned it really well. I was too proud to go out, particularly with people I knew, and give a presentation that was mediocre. And I got compliments, but you know, I also got good ideas. You're too fast, you're not looking at me, you blah, blah, blah. But mostly it was very positive. And then I would say to them, well, who do you know who I might be able to talk to about this? So my early sales was referrals from friends and family. It wasn't friends and family, but people were much more comfortable helping me and giving me names, and I was much more comfortable doing a presentation to strangers than the people I knew. And then, about a year later, when I felt more confident and I'd learned a lot more, I called up the family members and the friends. I said, you know, I've been doing this for a year. There are a lot of things I've learned. Would you have any objection to getting together with me? By the way, that is a quote from a man by the name of Tom Wolfe, who developed a program called Planned Personal Protection, and I think that's also one of the most powerful things I ever learned. Would you have any objection to getting together with me? I find it's just such a comfortable question, because if they do, you're giving them permission to ask, to state it right away. And that leads to another prospecting thing. I have a big advantage for prospecting that none of you have. I live on Long Island, and to get to the city, I take a train. I didn't notice any trains around here except for the tram at New York, or whatever. Anyway, there are no trains here. But when I was on a train, I would always try to sit next to someone who looked successful, and I'd start a conversation. Now, you could do this at a restaurant, at a Starbucks, any place. People love to talk about themselves. So I'm at a Starbucks, and I see a guy, and I see he's got a wedding ring. I said, oh, you know, how long have you been married? Or have you been married 10 years like I have, you know, based on, you know, how old they look? And I'm off and running. Generally, they'll tell me if they're married, how many kids they have. I find out where they work, what their job is, and from that I have an idea of what they might be earning. I may even know somebody at that company, so I could drop a name. And I am doing a very general fact find. And depending on whether it's a restaurant where it's a long meal or it's a coffee at Starbucks, in Starbucks, let's say, within about 4 or 5 minutes, I'll pick something they talked about. Like, you know, I got kids who are 10 and 12, and I'm worried about how to pay for college. So, but he said that. He doesn't even know who I am. So I'll extend my name. I'll say, oh, by the way, I'm Allan, and they give me their name. Paul. One of the things that I do for people is show them how to save for college. Would you have any objection to getting together next Tuesday morning or Thursday afternoon over a cup of coffee, and I can tell you about it? Another prospecting idea. On the Long Island Railroad, I was about 1 for 3. I also learned not to do this with women because they would right away think I'm trying to hit on them. I don't know why, I wasn't that attractive, but anyway, you know, the different things that we learn. Getting center of influence, about 5 minutes? About 5 minutes, is that good for everybody? If I have 10, I can keep going too. But one of the best things I learned that from my GA on getting centers of influence. When I've met with someone, I'm doing a fact finder, and we have a little bit of a relationship. During the fact finder, I ask them if they're happy with their accountant. If they say yes, I say, is he someone you'd recommend to other people? Yeah. Well, would you mind giving me his name and phone number? Because from time to time, I have clients asking me for introductions to accountants, and I'll say the same thing about the attorney. And I try to meet as many people as possible to be able to make recommendations. So let's say the attorney's name is Bob Smith. If the next day I call up and I say, is this Bob Smith? Yeah, well, Carl Jones suggested I give you a call. He's very impressed with you as an accountant. My business is insurance and financial planning, and from time to time I have clients asking me for introductions to an accountant. Would you have any objection to getting together? If they say yes, they're doing me a favor, because they're stupid. You know, here's an opportunity laid in their lap. If they don't want it, I'm not interested in seeing them. But usually they say yes, and I'll ask them at the first meeting a lot about the work they do, if they're in any niches that they have, like they do retail or they do manufacturers or whatever. And then I'll tell them a little bit about my business, and based on that conversation, very often we'll get together again and talk some more. And some of my best centers of influence have come from that source. Another thing that's really valuable to remember, and I have this underneath my computer screen, the 4 S's. Some will, some won't, so what, someone's waiting. In other words, when we're prospecting, we're always thinking, I need to make this appointment. It's really not every call you make, it's how many calls you have to make. I wrote 100 cases a year, I said, for my first 10 years. But I was working essentially 8 to 5. I bought a house near my office. I'd go home for dinner with my wife and 2 daughters at the time. Now I have a 3rd. Anyway, and about 6 o'clock I'd be out seeing my first appointment around 6:30. And I try to have 2 at night also. Get home at 10, go to sleep, get up, get to the office at 8. 5 days a week, 8 to 5, and 4 days a week, 6 to 10. Fridays I took off. After dinner, I was home with my kids. Saturday, I would try to have appointments from 9 to 3. And Sunday, I like getting up early. I'd sneak off and I'd study for my CLU. That was an easier schedule than a doctor, but I don't want to ask how many people are doing anything close to that schedule. I don't want to, embarrass the people who couldn't raise their hand. But that's your choice. Not necessarily for the experienced agents, but for the half here who are new. I'm not that smart, but I was willing to work right. Now, there is a story I heard of a manager, and are there any managers here? Because I don't want to offend them, but it was about a manager who had a young recruit who was really gung-ho, and he looked like he'd be fantastic. So he took him to a hill on the most expensive part of town and said to him, take a look around. If you do everything I say, the way I say it, for the next 5 years, this could be mine. One other idea, and if you have time, I'll gladly go on, but when people are skeptical, a lot of my business now comes from selling large group medical plans. The Islander hockey organization is one of my clients, not the players, but they're 120 people. who back up a hockey team, and I assume for football and basketball, which are bigger organizations. Time's up. Is there anyone here from Aflac? Skepticism. You know, I'm talking to them. We have a way to reduce your medical costs by 10 to 25% while matching the benefits. It works 70% of the time. Most of the people say, oh, I have an agent. I've heard it all. And whether it's medical insurance or life or disability, or that you do investments in a different way, what I say to them is the following. I learned a while ago that there's basically 3 bodies of knowledge. They're the things that you know that you know. Like I know a lot about my business, I know a lot about my religion. You know, you pick things for yourself that may be appropriate for this meeting. Or you try to pick things for that person. If you know he's a golfer, you know things about your business, you know about golf, you pick a couple of other things. The second body of knowledge is the things that you don't, the things that you know that you don't know. So for me, it's physics, and and for me, it's golf. So I pick a couple of things, and that usually gets a smile. But wouldn't you agree that the biggest body of knowledge is the things that you don't know, And maybe what I want to talk to you about fits into that category. Would you be willing to invest 25 minutes to find out? Some will, some won't, so what? Someone's waiting. I understand there's about 5,000 people in Las Vegas that are licensed to sell insurance. There are roughly 200 people who are members of NAIFA. To me, that's the same acid test as the accountant who doesn't want to meet with me and get referrals. If you're not a member of NAIFA, you're not a member of your professional organization, you're not really committed to the business. So of those 5,000 people, you may only have about 200 competitors. And by the way, Mahesh and I were talking last night. Another advantage of being part of the association is if I come across a new prospect and he has insurance with someone I know from my NAIFA chapter, I know from MDRT, the first thing I'm going to do is compliment that person. And the second is just tell them a little bit more about what I do. But then within 24 hours, I'm going to call that other agent up and tell them, by the way, yesterday I just met so-and-so, and see what their reaction is. They may say, well, thank you very much for warning me, and I step out of it. But if I'm talking about the numbers here, that there are 200 NAIFA members and 4,800 people who are not, that's a great prospect for me. I don't know them, and I don't care. But the other part is that there are 1.4 million people who live in Las Vegas, 1.8 million. Let's say 2/3 of them are not prospects. That only leaves 600,000 people for the 200 people who are in the NAIFA chapter. What holds you back from having 10 to 15 appointments a week? That's the question I'd like to leave with you, and I appreciate having this opportunity to share what I've learned from great people. Thank you.